Today we're going to be discussing natural moral law, which is chapter 2.1 of the OCR A-Level Religious Studies in the Ethics section. So firstly we're going to look at the key terms. So have a pause of this video and see whether you can define all of these key terms before we go straight into them. So, what is natural moral law? Natural law is a deontological theory based on behaviour that accords with given laws or moral duties or moral rules that exist independently of human societies and systems. So in this sense, when we talk about deontological, it's an absolutist theory, and what that means is that there is a direct right and wrong, not depending on the circumstances, but before. There is a definite right or wrong. And the word deontological itself means from Latin for duty, and its ethics focus on the intrinsic rightness or wrongness of actions, like I said earlier. Then we have eudaimonia, and this means living well as an ultimate end in life which all other actions should lead towards, or the direct translation of eudaimonia is happiness and flourishing. Telos is the end or purpose of something. Synderesis is Aquinas' rule to follow the good and avoid evil, so the rule which all precepts of Aquinas apply to and follow. So talking about precepts, the primary precept is the most important rule in life. It's to protect life, to reproduce, to live in an ordered community or society, to teach the young or to educate, and to believe in God. And secondary precepts are the laws which follow from the primary precepts. So what is natural moral law? It's in the Christian tradition is based around the thinking of Thomas Aquinas, who is to my right here, and it is a system of ethics based on the principle that there is such a thing as human nature and that we should live in accordance with the human nature. So we should aim to fulfill our purpose, which is fulfilling human nature. And natural law, like I said earlier, is deontological, so it has an absolute system of rules based on actions and duties. And Aquinas taught that human nature is fundamentally good and that all rational people seek goodness, which can be found in the vision of God. Now, for Thomas Aquinas, he uses a lot of human reason within natural moral law, so he thinks that we are autonomous beings that then choose to follow natural moral law. So the ultimate end, that's meant to say, is the telos. So Aquinas used the thinking of Aristotle's to develop his own ideas about ethics. So Aristotle argued that something was good if it is fulfilled its purpose. And he argued that people aim to achieve eudaimonia, happiness, and this flourishing. So by flourishing, he meant if, for example, someone was to be a teacher, they have to be the best possible teacher they could be that causes this flourishing. And Aquinas taught that moral actions come from free rational beings, and we have to be genuinely free to make moral decisions, and we have to make them using our own reason, which he believed was given to us by God. And according to Aquinas, God should be the ultimate end or purpose of human life. So being in the presence of God is the telos of, or ultimate reason for our existing. And Aquinas thought that people need help from God in order to direct their motives and their actions, making sure that they do the right thing for the right reasons. Aquinas had these 4 tiers of law that he believed morality followed. So he identified 4 levels. At the very top is eternal law. So this is the unchanging reason of God, absolute for all people and all times, and this is the highest form of law. Then we have divine law, and this is the commandments given by God. They're usually found in the Bible and teaching how to live. So a really good example of this is the 10 Commandments. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not worship more than one God, those kind of things. And then we have natural law. So people can perceive eternal law by using their reason to reflect on the world and work out how they should behave and think. And God uses natural law to make the eternal law accessible to people, and natural law is universal. Now, by saying it's universal, we're saying that it applies to all people, everywhere, all cultures, at the same time, everywhere. So it's unchangeable in that sense, and it's not subjective. Because of this, natural law is also observed from the world around, so we can use our reasons to observe it and then develop the primary precepts, which we'll go into in a minute. And then we have human law. So these are the laws that people come up with in response to the higher tiers of law, or in response to the needs of society and the way it is organised. So human law is the lower tier of law and can be broken if higher forms of law conflict with it. So an example of this is something like, in modern day society, we have the law of do not kill. And we've seen that this is the most important thing to do. And obviously within our justice system, people who do kill end up going to prison and serving most of the time life. Or in America, sometimes the death penalty. However, with human law, there can be flaws. So an example of this is something like Nazi Germany and Hitler's Nuremberg laws. So during Nazi Germany, it was forbidden for Jews to marry non-Jews. And obviously this wasn't a rule that is seen to be intrinsically wrong. It's faulty. Or for example, that certain people went to concentration camps and were killed. That was a human law that Hitler came up with, which is obviously feels intrinsically wrong. So this illustrates the fact that just because something is in human law doesn't mean it's actually right. And obviously many people during the war retaliated and really worked towards working against that, so resisted. And in that sense, it really illustrates the flaws of human law that there is. And this shows that human law is unlike natural, divine, or eternal law because it is flawed and it comes from humans, which is why it's obviously not intrinsically correct, always. It can be, but it can be flawed. So the precepts. Aquinas said that the precept, or the general rule for behaviour of natural law, is the rule of synderesis, so to do good and avoid evil. So Aquinas claimed God gives us reason so that we can work out for ourselves what to do to fulfil our telos. And Aquinas thought that all human beings are inclined to do good because all species want to survive. This is something that you can evaluate because technically all species do want to survive through something like the theory of evolution and natural selection, which you can illustrate here. However, it's not always true of all people. So it's interesting to just give that balanced argument there. So what are the precepts? So he classified 5 primary precepts. So like we said earlier, to worship God, to live in an ordered society, to reproduce, to learn and teach people about God, and to defend the innocent and preserve life. So these rules are the really important precepts that Aquinas recognised that we all should follow. But then we have secondary precepts, and these are derived from the primary precepts, and they illustrate the practical application of the primary precept. So for example, if I said, oh, I want to have an abortion, you would look at these primary precepts and go, well, it goes against to reproduce, and it goes against to defend the innocent and to preserve life. So therefore, do not abort. So this is how you would find out with the secondary precepts what they are, is through saying, I want to do this, for example, and then seeing what it goes against. The same could be done with homosexuality. So unfortunately for Aquinas, homosexuality goes against to live in an ordered society and to reproduce. And he would say this because when Aquinas meant to live in an ordered society, he meant the traditional Christian family perspective, which we'll look in the criticisms, is different nowadays, and nowadays we would not say this, but this is what Aquinas would have said if he was still alive. So hopefully that illustrates to you that whatever ethical dilemma you come up with, you have to measure it against the primary precepts, and then you derive the secondary precepts from this. Then Aquinas talked about these real and apparent goods. So he made a distinction between them. So real goods are those which are in accordance with the primary precepts and God wishes for humanity, whilst apparent goods are things which tempt us because they seem enjoyable, but they don't actually lead to any further aim of promoting human flourishing. Now, if you look at my video on utilitarianism, you can see the similarity between Mill's higher and lower pleasures. So real goods or higher pleasures are something which we need to use our primary precepts and our reason and our observations around this. So this would be something like learning a new language, obeying God, reading the Bible for Aquinas. Or it could be something like playing an instrument, because we have to use our skills and our human rationality to do them. Whilst apparent goods are something which doesn't use this. So for example, if I want to watch a TV or if I want to eat loads of food, it doesn't give me any more. I don't need to use my rationality. They are animalistic pleasures. So Aquinas said that we can use reason to really distinguish between these real and apparent goods. The other thing that Aquinas said that we can do is have these natural and cardinal virtues. So he identified them, that he said that they were really discovered by reason. So the first one is prudence, so the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the use of reason. Temperance is the quality of moderation, of self-restraint. Fortitude, courage in pain or adversity. And justice, so people are to be treated impartially, fairly, properly, and reasonably by the law. So really illustrate what these are. You can give examples of them as well, but this is what Aquinas thought would be really useful by using our reason as well to distinguish natural, the higher and lower pleasures through natural law. There are also these other virtues identified in the Bible. So love is one, so you could give the example of agape through Jesus. You can use the quote, neither slave nor free, Jew nor Gentile, you are all one in Christ Jesus, really illustrates hope and love. Through faith, you can also illustrate Jesus' resurrection and his complete dedication and faith and trust in God when he died. When he said, God, I commend to you my spirit. He gave his soul up to him because he knew that he had a better plan. And that can be coincide with hope as well. But those are examples from the Bible that you can use to back this up, as obviously natural moral law is mostly a Catholic ethics. But Aquinas also recognised this doctrine of double effect, and within these discussions and situations, there is a single action that has two effects. So for example, an act of self-defense results in the death of the attacker. So here, the intention is the most important, because if the intention was to do something good, then the action cannot be bad, even if there was an unintentional bad result of one of the side effects. So you cannot intend to do the bad thing, you have to intend to do the good thing. But if the bad thing happens unintentionally, then it's permissible rather than justifiable. Now, what's the difference between permissible and justifiable? Well, something's justifiable if it is completely the right thing to do. That is an absolute right thing. Whilst permissible is more what this act of self-defense would have been, because it doesn't mean the actual act was right because it ended up in the death of the attacker, taking a life. However, in that situation, because you were being attacked, it is permissible, so it's allowable even though it's not completely okay. So this is known as the double effect, doctrine of double effect, and it can also be used in cases of euthanasia, for example. So if the intention of giving powerful doses of a drug is to relieve pain, then the action is good even if an unintentional effect of the drug is to shorten their life. So although the drug might cause a quicker or earlier death, that is not the intention of using it. If it is, then it's not the right thing to do, and it doesn't go by the doctrine of double effect. And another way that you can use this is through the just war theory. So if many people remember, the just war theory is also done by Aquinas, and he comes up with 6 points of what makes a just war. The first one is that the war can't be started by your country. Every other action must have been taken before the start. Every other kind of way to resolve the conflict must have happened before an act of war is occurring, or they come to the conclusion of starting a war. the aim has to be to stop the war, and it has to be to end evil. There's a few others, but if you're doing the OCR spec, you don't have to know all of this. But it's a really good example, because if you're committing a just war, or in a just war, for example, and you're a soldier and you're going out to fighting and you have a gun and you're shooting at the enemy, as long as your intention isn't to kill but defend the victims of the war, for example, or for fight for justice, then if your bullet does kill someone, then it goes through the doctrine of double effect, because your intention wasn't to kill here, it was to defend and to stop the war. So as long as that is, it can be also used as an example for the doctrine of double effect. So what are some strengths of natural moral law as a system of ethics? So the way natural law is applied can vary widely, and this can be seen as a strength as it allows for consideration of different circumstances. This is through the doctrine of double effect, for example, and some see natural law as offering clarity and consistency in its answers to ethical problems. This is because there's no thinking about it. There's a direct right or wrong. You don't have to go through the hedonic calculus, for example, like you do in actual utilitarianism, and it takes you 5 to 10 to 15, 20 minutes deciding what to do in an ethical dilemma. Natural moral law already gives you laws and rules that you should follow very quickly and very easily, knowing the precepts. So you just look at the precepts and then you decide what the natural law, the secondary precept is, and then you know what to do straight away. It can also offer a way of looking at the world which is absolute and can apply to all times and cultures, so it's universal, and that is very appealing to many people because there's no kind of doubt of what you're doing anywhere else. It also combines ideas of religious ideas with reason, and that's a really big positive for religious believers and theists, so people to exercise some autonomy in decisions about right or wrong. So it's not strictly a religious perspective because it has a concept of reason as well. So in this way, it's really easy to work out what is right or wrong using natural law and making it a helpful system of ethics in this way. But there are also some weaknesses of natural moral law. And one of them is that the way natural law is applied can vary a lot. So this can be seen as a weakness because it's not always clear what to do in a moral dilemma. And I know this contrasts what I just said, but this is also shown through the doctrine of double effect. So, for example, if a woman is pregnant and having a baby, but continuing with pregnancy might shorten her own life, the primary precepts in this instant won't help you in deciding whether to continue with the pregnancy or not, because you've got the right to reproduce and preserve life. However, the woman is going to die, so her own life is in a problem here because her own life is at risk. So in that situation, it's not very clear of what you do because it's not clear what the intention is. Is the intention to save the baby? And obviously this would result in the death of the mother, or is the intention here to save the mother and obviously take the life of the baby? So this really doesn't show a very clear outcome to the moral dilemma, which can be quite problematic. Aquinas' version of natural law also presupposes a belief in God, which not everyone has. So again, this wouldn't appeal to atheists, for example, or of people of different religions that isn't Christianity. Our understanding of what is natural is also not always accurate and not always unchanging. So, for example, homosexuality has been seen in the past as unnatural, but many people in the modern world now see it as natural. So, therefore, the primary precepts are not helpful in this sense because it was never wrong to be gay and a homosexual because it is seen as a natural thing. So therefore, it's not really clear on this kind of aspect, even in fact for reproducing, because like a married couple, that's when a woman's hit menopause, they can't reproduce. So in this sense, it really confuses whether they can have sex, for example, as well, because they can't reproduce. So Aquinas, as you will see later on in Sexual Ethics, he was very much a believer that sex was only for reproduction, for the purpose of reproduction. So there's a lot of kind of controversy and problems surrounding his understanding on why of what sex is for example. And sometimes natural law might seem overly legalistic and unsympathetic to particular circumstances, like, for example, the euthanasia example. It wouldn't allow the death of someone if it's intended. It would only allow it if it wasn't intended, like with the dosage of the pill. The other thing is that the world has changed very much since the time of Aquinas. So some application of natural law might seem inappropriate today. So for example, the use of artificial methods of contraception causes controversy. So it might be seen to go against the precept of reproduction, but avoiding artificial contraception could lead to unwanted pregnancy or the spread of sexually transmitted diseases as well. And this was really prominent in the AIDS epidemic, where the Church or the Vatican didn't allow for people to use condoms because of the concept of sex being to reproduce. So again, it spread it far wider than it should have. But again, this is changing, and slowly some churches, it depends what denomination and which priest you're talking to, will allow it depending on the situation. So again, maybe more situation ethics approach might be more accepting and more loving in this instance. So here is your AO1 knowledge. If you can answer all the questions, and you know all of your AO1 knowledge, so do have a think about that. Now it's time for some exam practice, because practice makes perfect. So the first question you can look at is, discuss critically the use of the concept of telos in natural law. So again, you'd use all the content we went through, and remember, telos is about purpose. You could talk about human flourishing, the concepts of how Aristotle influenced Aquinas, and then go through the whole concepts with strengths and weaknesses, evaluating and giving a conclusion. Then we have this one. One of the greatest strengths of natural law is that it provides an absolute and universal standard for judging rights and wrongs. Discuss. Again, very similar, but just make sure that you refer back to the question. You can really, illustrating this judging rights and wrong, I would really go into the doctrine of double effect after you explained all of natural moral law, and give those strengths and weaknesses. You might also want to bring in another ethical theory, such as Kantian ethics, utilitarianism, or situation ethics, to really illustrate maybe that they are better at judging rights or wrong. Maybe Kantian ethics might be better here, because it is also a fellow absolute and universal standard, but it doesn't use the Bible, it uses reason alone. Remember to also give examples and analysis, and you can give your own opinion suggesting what the strengths and weaknesses are. Don't be limited to what we've covered. There can be many other criticisms or strengths of natural moral law or any of the ethical problems and theories as well. So join me next time for more religious studies, philosophy and ethics.